We're challenging one of the most fundamental, comforting assumptions we all carry.
And what's that?
The idea that learning should feel easy. Today, we're figuring out how to make knowledge truly stick.
That's our mission, and it's a crucial one. We are moving well beyond theory, lore, and the kind of intuition that often guides how we teach and study.
Right.
Our goal is to extract practical, research-backed principles and proven strategies, yielded from extensive cognitive psychology research spanning decades.
These are things you can actually use.
Yes, techniques you can put to work immediately at no cost to acquire knowledge and skills and, most importantly, have them readily available for future use.
Whether that's a year from now in a high-stakes meeting
Or in the middle of an emergency, exactly.
And the core claim of this entire deep dive, the one that is truly counterintuitive and, frankly, a bit uncomfortable for any busy person, is this.
I think I know where you're going.
Learning that is deep and durable, the kind that lasts, is inherently effortful. It must be a struggle.
Exactly. We must learn to love the struggle. Think about it this way. The learning that feels fast, fluent, and easy, the feeling you get when you reread a chapter and think, oh, I know this, is dangerous.
Dangerous, that's a strong word.
It's a trick. It's like writing vital information in the sand. It's here today, giving you that warm, fuzzy feeling of temporary mastery, but it's guaranteed to be gone tomorrow when you actually try to retrieve it.
So we're looking for strategies that write knowledge in stone.
In stone, that's the goal.
So if the feeling of ease is actually a warning sign, we have to start by aggressively debunking some deeply ingrained myths about how we think we learn and how our memory works.
Let's do it.
Let's unpack this. First up, the illusion of repetition. We are, culturally conditioned to believe that if we just expose ourselves to material enough,
Yeah, if we just see it enough times.
if we repeat it enough times, it will eventually sink in. This is the classic fire hose method of instruction. Just blast the student with data.
It is the foundation of so many training systems, especially in high-volume, rapid turnaround professional settings.
Like what?
We see it vividly in the story of Matt Brown, the pilot we follow in the sources. He was advancing from piston planes to a new, complex business jet.
Okay.
His employer put him through a dizzying 18 days of training. The first 7 days were spent straight in the classroom, 10 hours a day, receiving a sheer deluge of instruction on all the plane systems.
Just a fire hose of information.
A total fire hose. Electrical, fuel, pneumatics, hydraulics, fail-safe tolerances, nonstop, passive information transfer.
And on top of that, he had to internalize about 80 specific memory action items.
Right, and these are the critical things.
These are emergency procedures, things you must execute without hesitation in a critical situation like an electrical fire, a decompression event, or engine failure.
You simply cannot afford to look up the manual when you're losing 200 feet per second. There's no time.
And that is why the passive massed exposure approach is so fundamentally flawed, right?
Exactly. The sources show the fallacy of that mere exposure approach has been well established since, well, the mid-1960s, with experiments like those conducted by psychologist Endel Tulving.
This study is pivotal, you're saying?
It is, because it systematically destroyed the myth of passive repetition.
So tell us about the Tulving experiment. It's fascinating because it seems to prove definitively that passive reading is, well, useless for later recall, even if you do it many times.
Okay, so Tulving designed a study where participants were first exposed to lists of paired items, something like a word paired with a number, chair 9, table 2, and so on.
Simple enough.
They read these lists 6 times. The crucial detail here is that they had no expectation of a memory test. They were simply told to read. It was pure passive exposure.
So they weren't trying to learn them, they were just running their eyes over the data 6 times.
Precisely. After this exposure phase, the participants were told they would be tested on a new list of nouns they had to actively try to memorize.
Okay, so now the real test begins.
Right. For one group, those nouns were the same ones they had just read 6 times in the paired lists, chair, table, etc. For the control group, the nouns were entirely new.
Logically, you would assume the group that saw the word 6 times has a huge head start. It's common sense.
It's what everyone would assume, but the results just defied all intuition.
What happened?
They were statistically indistinguishable. Prior exposure reading the nouns 6 times did not aid later recall at all when the participants were actively trying to learn lists of nouns.
Nothing. No advantage whatsoever.
None. The act of seeing the word chair 6 times did absolutely nothing to build the memory trace necessary for future retrieval. Tulving concluded that when the information is presented without the learner having to actively do something with it, it's never truly encoded in a durable way.
That is just astonishing. Our common sense suggests 6 repetitions must give you some advantage, even a small one, but the science says mechanical, passive repetition.
Without the effort of
Well, it's
retrieval.
functionally useless. You're not strengthening the memory trace, you're just maintaining it briefly in working memory.
It speaks to the difference between recognition and recall.
Explain that.
When you reread your notes, your brain recognizes the information, and that feels good. It's fluent. But the moment you close the book and try to recall the information, you realize you haven't strengthened the connections necessary to find it in the vast library of your long-term memory.
So it's a false confidence.
Totally. You're simply looping information through short-term memory, which feels fluent, but the memory trace hasn't been strengthened for long-term storage.
That leads perfectly into the second major myth that every student, and I mean every professional prepping for a certification has relied on: the peril of mass practice or cramming.
Cramming. The all-nighter.
We all do it. We know it works for the test tomorrow, but what's the steep long-term cost?
Well, mass practice is when you do the same thing over and over repeatedly in a short, intense period. This could be pulling an all-nighter before an exam, focusing fully on one topic.
Or in a more practical setting.
Or practicing the exact same surgical maneuver 15 times back-to-back in an hour.
The allure is undeniable, though. You feel productive. You feel like you're making massive gains quickly.
And you are, temporarily. Mass practice gives you that immediate warm sensation of mastery.
I know that feeling.
Because you're relying so heavily on short-term working memory, the information is right there, accessible. You see rapid, gratifying improvements. If you reread a chapter 4 times, by the end of the 4th reading, you feel incredibly fluent with the terminology.
And you might even nail the quiz the next morning.
You might. But that feeling is entirely misleading, and it's setting you up for catastrophic failure down the road.
It's transitory and fragile.
The research is crystal clear on this. The rapid gains produced by massed practice are often followed by equally rapid, catastrophic forgetting.
So you pass the test, but you haven't really learned anything.
You may nail the test tomorrow, but that knowledge isn't built into a sturdy structure that can be accessed months or years down the line when you actually need to apply it under pressure. Massed practice, it bypasses the deep cognitive work required for consolidation.
So we have to strategically reject the feeling of ease and instead embrace strategic difficulty. If passive exposure and cramming are counterproductive, what are the research-validated strategies that actually build durable retention?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
The entire premise of effective durable learning rests on 3 pillars that force effort and manage the learning cycle over time: retrieval practice, space practice, and interleaving or variation.
That's the trifecta.
We'll start with the first and arguably the most powerful, retrieval practice, which is really just the power of testing yourself.
The core principle here is profoundly counterintuitive, and it changes the entire perspective on testing. Testing is not merely a tool for measuring what you know. It is a powerful tool for building better mastery. The act of retrieving a memory, that effortful search, changes the memory.
It changes it.
Yes, it makes it easier to retrieve again later. It strengthens the memory trace, making the route to that knowledge more durable and faster.
So it's the cognitive equivalent of strengthening a hiking trail by repeatedly walking it. The first time, it's overgrown. The 10th time, it's a clear path.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the path only strengthens if you have to search for it.
Okay, let's go back to the pilot.
Think about the Matt Brown example again. He has 80 high-stakes memory action items he must execute flawlessly. His initial fire hose training was massed exposure, which we now know is useless long-term.
So why does his knowledge stay sharp now?
Because his employer uses systematic spaced retrieval practice.
It's built into his job.
Precisely. Matt is required to reinforce this mastery every 6 months in a battery of rigorous tests and flight simulations. These simulators aren't just pass-fail, they are high-stakes retrieval practice, where the cognitive load is identical to a real emergency.
And he says you hardly ever have a real emergency in aviation.
Almost never. So, as Matt notes, if you don't practice the retrieval, the reflexive action sequence, there's no way to keep those essential procedures fresh and reflective when your life depends on it. The simulator forces the brain to practice the retrieval path until it's instant.
In this principle, it translates directly and effectively to the classroom. I love the Columbia Middle School study from 2006 involving Patrice Bain's 6th grade social studies class.
A great example.
They were studying ancient Egypt and China. Lots of dates, names, complex concepts. So what was the intervention and how did it change the learning environment?
The intervention was subtle but profound. Instead of relying on just 3 large, high-stakes unit exams, the teacher, Andy Sobel, introduced occasional cumulative short quizzes throughout the semester.
And these weren't for a grade, necessarily?
They weren't graded harshly. They were primarily tools for retrieval. The quizzes covered material from the current week, but crucially, they also cycled through material from previous weeks.
So it wasn't just, what did you read last night? It was, hey, remember that concept from last month?
Yes. This forced the students to actively retrieve knowledge that had started to fade, which makes the retrieval more effortful and thus more potent for memory.
And the results?
The results were dramatic and consistent across 3 semesters. Students showed significantly better quality answers and improved final exam scores. The teacher even noted that the quality of class discussions went way up
Why do you think that is?
because they had a sturdy, accessible base of facts to work from. Their written work became comparable to upper division classes in high school simply from that foundation.
So the act of regular, cumulative quizzing allowed the students to establish that base of knowledge and retention. They weren't wasting cognitive resources later trying to figure out what a basic word or concept was about.
Right, it freed their minds to go to a higher level, to evaluate, synthesize, and apply concepts in different settings. Retrieval practice is the engine of higher-order thinking.
And it's also important to realize that the effort level within the retrieval practice matters greatly.
A huge amount. Retrieval practice is most effective when it requires maximum cognitive effort.
What do you mean by that?
Tests that require the learner to supply the answer, like an essay, a short answer test, or even just working with flashcards where you cover the answer, are generally more potent for long-term retention than simple recognition tests.
Like multiple choice or true-false.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Multiple choice, while beneficial, relies on recognizing the correct answer among foils. Short answer requires you to search your memory entirely from scratch.
And where more cognitive effort is required for that search, greater retention results.
But just to be clear, some retrieval is better than none.
Correct. But even those multiple-choice quizzes yielded strong benefits compared to passive reading. The key takeaway is that we must strategically delay retrieval practice, because delayed retrieval requires more effort than immediate practice.
And this necessity for delayed effort leads us perfectly to our second pillar.
It does.
Pillar 2, spaced practice, the literal antithesis of cramming and the solution to the problem of rapid forgetting.
The core principle is that spreading out the study of a topic, returning to it periodically over time, leads to dramatically better retention.
You're letting yourself forget a little.
You deliberately allow a little forgetting to occur between sessions, which makes the subsequent retrieval harder. And that struggle is what strengthens the memory trace, writing it in stone.
This sounds grueling because every time you come back to the material, you feel that initial frustrating dip in fluency. But the results are undeniable.
They are.
The medical community provides a powerful high-stakes example with the study of surgical residents learning microsurgery, how to reattach tiny vessels.
This study involved 38 surgical residents learning an extremely delicate skill set. They were split into 2 groups. Half completed 4 short, identical lessons in a single day. This is mass practice, which is often the standard, condensed, in-service training schedule.
The cramming group.
The cramming group. The other half spaced the exact same 4 lessons out over a full week, returning to the material briefly each day.
And the goal wasn't just how well they could do it right after.
No. The goal was to measure not just how well they could perform the procedure immediately, but how well they could retain and execute it later under pressure.
Now, they waited a month.
Exactly. The final assessment, given a month later, measured their mastery of the procedure. And the results were shocking. They highlight the literal cost of cramming.
How so?
The spaced group dramatically outperformed the massed group on every single measure. Elapsed time, precision, number of hand movements, and overall success rate. The performance gap was immense.
And here is the truly critical result that proves the danger of that warm sensation of mastery generated by massing.
The integrity of the vessel itself.
Tell us.
Crucially, 16% of the massed group damaged the lab rat's vessels beyond repair and were unable to complete their surgery successfully.
16%.
16%. This is an outcome that, in a clinical setting, would have severe consequences. The massed group showed rapid gains, followed by catastrophic, dangerous forgetting. The spaced group maintained their capability.
That 16% failure rate is the hidden cost of cramming. You might feel ready, but your skills are fragile.
Deeply fragile.
So why does spacing work so much better on a neurological level? What happens in the brain during that downtime?
Well, durable learning requires time for consolidation.
Consolidation.
Consolidation is the process where the memory traces, the brain's physical and chemical representations of the new learning, are strengthened, given meaning, and connected to prior knowledge into a coherent network.
And this takes time.
This process unfolds over hours and even days, and it requires sleep. Rapid-fire mass practice leans solely on the fragile short-term memory system. Spacing works because the increased effort required to retrieve the learning after a little forgetting has the powerful effect of re-triggering this deep consolidation process, further strengthening the memory structure each time you revisit it.
So we've learned retrieval strengthens and spacing reinforces over time. Now for the third pillar, which adds versatility and breadth, interleaving and variation.
The core principle here is mixing things up strategically. Interleaving is the practice of studying or practicing different related topics or skills randomly, rather than blocking them sequentially.
Give me an example.
Instead of practicing algebra problems for 2 hours, then geometry for 2 hours, you mix them, switching back and forth.
This sounds difficult to implement, especially because it forces the brain to constantly switch gears and decide which tool to pull out of the toolbox. It must feel less efficient in the moment.
It absolutely does. Interleaving makes retrieval harder in the moment, it feels less productive, and learners often self-report lower proficiency during the training phase compared to the massed or blocked group.
But this difficulty is the key.
It's the whole point. It enables vastly more versatile application in later settings. You don't just practice task A, then task B, then task C. You practice A, C, B, A, C, B, forcing your brain to recognize the context each time.
Let's look at the classic study in motor skills application, the Cal Poly baseball hitting study.
A brilliant experiment. They had baseball players practice hitting different types of pitches. One group practiced massed pitch types, 15 fastballs in a row, then 15 curveballs in a row, then 15 changeups.
Get in a groove.
They saw rapid, gratifying improvement within each block, feeling very confident. The other group practiced randomly interspersed pitches interleave practice. The batter had no idea which type was coming next.
The interleaved group must have been highly frustrated initially because they were constantly adjusting, failing to establish that groove.
Precisely. They struggled initially, confirming the general rule that effortful learning feels less productive during the learning phase. But
when their hitting was assessed later,
when it was assessed later, in a live simulation where the pitches were again randomized, the interleaved group displayed markedly better hitting. They showed a superior ability to discriminate between pitch types and react appropriately when facing the unknown.
that's the critical distinction. It's one skill to hit a curveball when you know it's coming, and an entirely different, infinitely more valuable skill to hit one when you have to instantly analyze the ball's trajectory, recall the appropriate swing, and execute.
Exactly. Interleaving trains the necessary contextual discrimination.
And the superior ability to discriminate is the key insight that translates directly to complex professional fields like medicine or engineering.
It does. Douglas Larson at Washington University Medical School compared this specifically to bird classification and medical diagnosis.
Because in both cases, you have slightly different patterns that look similar, and getting it wrong has real consequences.
Yes. Variety helps us see nuances and discriminate between symptoms and their interrelationships. Every patient visit, every engineering problem is a test involving both explicit memory-conscious knowledge of symptoms and implicit memory, the automatic retrieval of past experience.
So interleaving builds these interconnected, versatile neural networks.
Right. It stops you from applying the same solution to every problem just because it's the one you just practiced.
You see this high-level integration of spacing and interleaving in elite fields like sports coaching, too. Coach Vince Dooley's approach to football practice at the University of Georgia is a textbook example.
It is. Dooley understood that his players needed reflexive application, not just rote execution. His team practiced special plays only on Thursdays
Spaced practice.
and ran them in a varied, non-sequential order.
Interleaved.
Exactly. The goal was to ensure players could adjust to what the opponent did, to discriminate the necessary countermove, not just execute a play in a vacuum. He would even slow down the rehearsal near game time, running through adjustments mentally. If they react like this, then this is what you would do.
That perfectly links spacing, interleaving, and the mental preparation needed for versatile application. Okay, so these three pillars, retrieval, spacing, and interleaving, form the foundation of how we structure learning.
They do.
But there are even deeper cognitive strategies we can employ to maximize how we process the information itself.
Yes, moving beyond the when and into the how.
Let's move beyond the schedule and into how we actively process and interact with the material. First up, elaboration, which is essentially giving material meaning by connecting it to your existing world.
Elaboration is the process of expressing new material in your own words, not just parroting the textbook and systematically connecting it with what you already know.
It's about building a web.
The more detailed your explanation of how the new learning relates to your prior knowledge, the stronger your grasp of the new learning will be, and the more connections you create to help you retrieve it later.
So you're building a web of knowledge instead of a series of isolated dots. And the sources note something remarkable about this process. There is no known limit to how much you can learn when practicing elaboration.
It's incredible, isn't it? If you just engage in mechanical repetition, you quickly hit a capacity limit, but elaboration opens up boundless capacity because you're continually building new architecture.
Because you're building a vast interconnected network rather than just storing isolated facts.
Right. For example, to grasp the abstract principle of angular momentum, you don't just read the definition. You ground it in something concrete and visual that you already understand.
Like what?
Like visualizing a figure skater, drawing her arms to her chest to speed up her rotation. You explain the physics using the skater as a reference point.
Or take a concept like heat transfer. Instead of memorizing the dictionary definitions of conduction, radiation, and convection.
You create a relatable narrative using three unique experiences.
Exactly.
Conduction is the direct transfer of energy, that physical sensation of warming your hands around a hot cup of cocoa.
You can feel that now.
Radiation is the energy moving through space, the sun pooling in your den on a wintry day. And convection is heat transfer via fluid movement, that life-saving blast of AC or furnace heat moving through your vents.
So these vivid, concrete examples, connected to personal experience, give the abstract concept multiple layers of meaning and multiple pathways for later retrieval.
You got it.
The second strategy, generation, is often confused with elaboration, but it's subtly different and emphasizes the sheer productive power of the struggle.
Yes, generation is the core strategy of trying to produce the solution or the answer before being taught the correct information.
So it's proactive.
Elaboration is explaining how something you already know works. Generation is actively searching for something you don't know yet. Even if you make errors during the search, the effort leads to better learning and retention of the correct answer when it is finally supplied.
The source uses a great real-world analogy here that emphasizes the stakes. The bowline knot.
A perfect example. Consider two scenarios. Scenario 1. You are shown the bowline knot passively by a Boy Scout in a city park.
Okay, low stakes.
Scenario 2. You are desperately struggling to attach an anchor line to your new boat. The tide is coming in, and the success of your entire outing depends on you remembering that knot. You are far, far more likely to learn and remember the bowline knot in Scenario 2, even if you fail 3 times first.
The urgency and the struggle prime your mind.
They do.
But wait, if I try and fail, or cast about for the wrong answer, say I'm trying to name the capital of Texas and I guess Dallas, then San Antonio, then Houston before hitting on Austin. Am I not just strengthening the wrong connections? Isn't that counterproductive?
That is the fear, but the research dispels it. As you cast about for a solution, retrieving related knowledge from memory, you strengthen the routes to the gap in your learning.
You're activating the neighborhood, so to speak.
You've mobilized related concepts. When the correct answer, Austin, is supplied, connections are instantly made to that related material that is fresh and active in your mind from the effort. Unsuccessful attempts encourage deep processing of the answer when it is supplied, creating fertile ground for encoding in a way that simply reading the answer cannot.
This helps us entirely dispel the persistent myth of errorless learning, which was popular in behavioral psychology decades ago.
Yes, the influential psychologist B.F. Skinner advocated for errorless learning spoon-feeding material so that errors were avoided at all costs. But we now understand that errors are an integral part of striving and generating.
They're part of the process.
When learners commit errors and are given corrective feedback, the errors are not learned. Instead, the entire process builds bridges to advanced learning. Learners who understand that learning is a struggle that involves making mistakes are psychologically more likely to tackle tough challenges and persist.
They see failure as useful corrective information.
That's it.
Moving from active engagement to integrated reflection, our final deep strategy. Reflection is the process that actively turns raw experience into enduring expertise.
Reflection involves systematically retrieving knowledge, connecting it to a new experience you just had, and mentally rehearsing what you might do differently next time. It's an integrated high-level combination of retrieval, elaboration, and generation applied after the fact.
So it's not passive daydreaming?
No, it requires conscious, deliberate thought.
The neurosurgeon Dr. Mike Ebersold provides an incredible narrative example of reflection being used to develop a life-saving technique that literally did not exist in any textbook.
It's a great story. Ebersold had to repair a torn venous sinus, a large, flat, complex structure in the brain that bleeds torrentially if damaged. The usual surgical stitch would rip right through the flat structure.
So the standard procedure wouldn't work.
It was failing. Over his career, he encountered multiple scenarios where standard techniques failed. He began a systematic process of reflection and mental rehearsal on those past surgical difficulties, using his slower, conscious System 2 thinking to explore alternatives.
So he used his slow, deliberate thought process to train his fast, immediate reflexes.
Exactly. The technique he developed, which he says is not written anywhere, was revolutionary.
What was it?
Instead of stitching the fragile membrane, he would cut 2 plugs of muscle tissue and stitch the ends of the torn vein to the muscle plugs, closing the vein without tearing the flat structure. He practiced this in his mind over and over, refining the steps, until it became a reflex maneuver he could depend on.
So when a patient came in, say, with a traumatic injury to that area and was rapidly losing 200 cubic centimeters of blood per minute, a true high-stakes emergency.
His mind didn't panic and search for a novel solution. It accessed a pre-rehearsed System 1 reflexive response derived from years of System 2 reflection. That is, reflection transformed into instant expertise.
It speaks to the idea that expertise isn't innate. It is a highly rehearsed structure built from the rubble of past failures and difficulties.
Well said.
This leads us directly to the most challenging part of the entire learning process. Knowing whether these effortful strategies are actually working, which requires avoiding the common pitfall of the illusion of knowing.
Yes, metacognition.
Metacognition is monitoring your own thinking, judging what you know and don't know, and assessing your own competence. The problem, as the sources note, is insidious. Poor judgment is incredibly common, and we usually don't know when we have it.
Right. And the most common culprit in academic settings is the illusion of fluency. When you reread your notes repeatedly or highlight a text extensively, the material becomes familiar.
You recognize it.
That familiarity, the ease of processing the text, creates a dangerous illusion of knowing. Fluency is not a reliable indicator of mastery. You feel fluent, so you assume you've mastered the content and stop studying.
But that fluency is based on recognition, not recall.
Exactly. It's a setup for failure on the actual retrieval test, because the test requires effortful recall, not just recognition.
But the most frightening illustrations of how our judgment can be hijacked involve high-stakes situations where intuition overrides objective reality.
To understand this, we must discuss Daniel Kahneman's 2 analytic systems, System 1 and System 2.
Okay, quick primer.
System 1 is automatic, intuitive, immediate, and unconscious. It's the running back dodging tackles without thinking about it. It is powerful, built on accumulated experience, but highly susceptible to error, bias, and illusion.
And System 2 is the slower, conscious process of analysis and reasoning, planning, checking impulses, deliberate computation. This is the system we use to train and correct System 1.
Yes, and the frightening illustration of System 1 failure overriding System 2 is the China Airlines Flight 006 incident in 1985.
What happened there?
The 747 was cruising at 41,000 feet when Engine 4 failed. The crew, trying to restart the engine, kept the autopilot engaged, which was struggling to compensate for the asymmetric thrust. The plane slowly, subtly, began to roll into a right bank.
And the pilot's senses were completely lying to him at that altitude.
Completely. High up, without a visible horizon, the pilot's vestibular reflex, his inner ear, gave him the complete, confident sensation of flying level.
He felt like he was fine.
His powerful System 1 instinct told him, everything is fine, the gauges must be wrong. He trusted his sense over his gauges, the objective instruments.
He was spatially disoriented, a problem compounded by the fact that the autopilot was failing to correct the slow roll.
The plane rolled past 45 degrees, entered a spiral dive, and overturned, heading straight down toward the Pacific. The crew was astonished, breaking through the clouds at 11,000 feet to see they were roaring toward the Earth.
That's terrifying.
The failure was a deadly combination. Losing the objective horizon and relying on sensory perception, System 1, that didn't jibe with the objective instruments, the System 2 data. They eventually managed to pull the plane up, but the incident is a chilling reminder of the fallibility of intuition, even in highly trained professionals.
So the takeaway there is that highly trained professionals must cultivate a disciplined system too that consciously monitors the instruments, the objective gauges, and questions the intuitive, immediate response of System 1.
You cannot rely on feeling right. You must rely on objective proof.
And that ties into how we judge our own general competence, which brings us to the widely misunderstood Dunning-Kruger effect,
Oh, yes.
the classic devastating finding. Incompetent people overestimate their own competence because they lack the necessary knowledge to recognize true skill.
And crucially, because they fail to sense a mismatch between their poor performance and what is desirable, they see absolutely no need to improve.
The original experiment demonstrated this clearly by giving students a logic test.
Right. Students in the lowest quartile of logical reasoning ability believe their general ability fell at the 68th percentile.
68.
They were completely disconnected from reality, believing they were above average. If you don't know what good looks like, you can't tell that you're bad.
The genius of the subsequent research was figuring out how to fix this judgment failure because simply telling someone they're incompetent doesn't work.
No, it just leads to defensiveness. But when poor performers were given training in logic, in this case, just 10 minutes of highly focused training in how to test the accuracy of a syllogism, they became much more accurate estimators of their own performance.
Just 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes compared to those who received no training. They were given the skills to identify competence, which allowed them to recognize their own lack of it, and thus the immediate, painful need to improve.
So if self-judgment is fallible and the only way to improve self-assessment is through training, we need objective calibration tools. The key is seeking and utilizing corrective feedback constantly.
Instructors must give it, but the learner must actively seek it. This is why tools like peer review are so essential. Take, for instance, morbidity and mortality conferences in medicine.
M&M conferences.
If a doctor has a bad patient outcome, the entire department picks it apart. It's a non-punitive, objective gauge used by System 2 to check the assumptions of the intuitive System 1 responses. It's a systemic safeguard against the illusion of knowing.
And simulation training perfectly mirrors the need to practice like you play, ensuring that your training matches real-world demands and provides instant, high-stakes feedback.
Absolutely.
The Minneapolis Police Department's firearms training scenarios are excellent examples of this kind of calibration.
Lieutenant Katherine Johnson described two profound scenarios that completely recalibrated her System 1 response. One involved a routine traffic stop where, in the simulator, she approached a car and the trunk popped open.
Oh, no.
A guy with a shotgun immediately rose out and shot her. It happened too fast to process.
And that's a classic example of an event that builds a System 1 reflex.
It created a lasting behavioral change. To this day, years later, every time she approaches a car on a traffic stop, she pushes down hard on the trunk without thinking to ensure it's secured.
Wow.
That one scenario led to a sharpened System 1 reflex based on high-stakes failure.
And the second example involved the danger of conscious ethical hesitation overriding immediate survival.
It was a domestic call scenario where she confronted a suspect. She hesitated to shoot when he turned his back, reasoning that she couldn't shoot him in the back.
Which seems reasonable.
But in the fraction of a second it took her to process that ethical choice, he turned back and shot her. That instant, high-stakes failure reinforced the critical survival mantra required in that job. Action beats reaction every time.
The simulation calibrated her judgment and refined her System 1 threshold for appropriate action.
It did.
These simulations are powerful because they provide immediate, high-stakes feedback. But the sources also provide a sobering fail-safe story about why practice must accurately match reality, or else the practice itself becomes the flaw.
This was the scenario involving officers training on disarming an assailant. To speed up the repetition of the drill, the officers were trained to repeatedly take the gun from the role-playing assailant.
And then what?
And then, reflexively, hand it back to their fellow officer so the drill could be repeated quickly.
Oh, I see where this is going. They were building a reflex that included giving the gun back.
Exactly. One officer, in the field, successfully took the gun from a suspect and then, in mutual astonishment, reflexively handed it right back to the assailant.
Unbelievable.
The training regime violated the cardinal rule. You will play like you practice. The practice contained a fatal flaw that built an incorrect System 1 response, illustrating that calibration requires relentless focus on matching training to the desired real-world outcome.
Calibration forces us to see our flaws and manage our internal illusions, which is essential because the final section explores the neuroscience behind effort. How much of our intellectual capability is actually within our control?
The biology of learning.
Let's talk about the incredible plasticity of the brain. For those listeners who worry they are too old or too far along in their career to adopt these new effortful strategies, what does the neuroscience say about the capacity for change?
The core finding is enormously hopeful and should dispel any notion that learning capacity shuts down after formal schooling ends. The brain is remarkably plastic, dynamic, and capable of being reorganized and rebuilt, even well into old age for most people.
The key is that effortful learning physically changes the brain.
It literally builds new connections and capabilities that were not there before.
So when we engage in retrieval or generation, when we struggle, we are literally rebuilding our intellectual architecture. Specifically, what is changing physically?
Two things are critical. First, we see that myelination, the waxy coating around the axons, which are the main wiring cables of the brain, continues to thicken into our 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Myelination, that's like insulation.
It is. It's the insulation that allows signals to travel faster and more efficiently. The more you use a circuit, the more insulation the brain builds around it. Therefore, effortful, consistent practice leads to faster processing speed and deeper capability throughout life.
The more you force the path to be used, the more the brain paves the road.
Precisely. And second, the hippocampus, the area of the brain where we consolidate learning and memory, continues to generate new neurons throughout life, a process called neurogenesis.
So we're growing new brain cells.
We are. Associative learning, such as connecting new names and faces or connecting new facts to old concepts elaboration, stimulates an increase in the creation of new neurons, suggesting the brain's enduring ability to not just reorganize but physically grow its capacity for learning.
So the physical capacity to learn and change is with us for life, but the motivation has to come from us. This ties directly into the concept of the growth mindset,
Which acts as a powerful cognitive multiplier. This comes from Carol Dweck's pioneering work. She found that individuals who adopt a growth mindset, the belief that intellectual ability is not fixed, but is largely within their own control because effort changes the brain, are far more aggressive learners and higher achievers than those with a fixed mindset.
The fixed mindset is that internal voice saying, I'm just not a math person, or I'm not naturally organized. They view failure as an indictment of their native, immutable ability.
Yes, and that mindset encourages avoidance. They avoid challenges for fear that failure would expose their supposed limitations.
Whereas the growth mindset,
The growth mindset individual embraces challenges, viewing failure not as an indictment, but as a badge of effort and a source of useful information, a sign to try a different strategy or dig deeper.
at the end of the day.
Ultimately, the sources argue that more than IQ, factors like discipline, grit, and a growth mindset are the true keys to success and durable learning.
It's the belief that difficulty means the brain is changing, not that the learner is incapable. This evidence of brain plasticity and effort directly challenges another widely accepted belief, the concept of learning styles.
Ah, the great myth.
We constantly hear, I'm a visual learner, so I need diagrams, or I'm an auditory learner, so I need to hear lectures. Is there empirical support for tailoring instruction to those preferences?
This is one of the most persistent, expensive, and damaging myths in education. It is widely held belief, but the sources are definitive. The premise that people learn better when instruction is tailored to their preferred style
Visual, auditory, kinesthetic.
is not supported by empirical research.
Even though people often have strong preferences, I might truly prefer to learn visually.
Preferences absolutely exist, and people should use them if it helps engagement, but instruction matching those preferences does not improve learning outcomes when measured by durable retention.
Can you give an example?
The most effective way to learn, for instance, microsurgery, is through hands-on practice, regardless of whether you think you're an auditory or visual learner. The nature of the material dictates the mode of instruction.
That is a critical finding for anyone designing training or studying on their own. The time and energy spent trying to assess and restructure instruction around these styles would be better spent focusing on the scientifically validated strategies we've discussed.
Retrieval, spacing, and interleaving, regardless of the learner's perceived style. Focus on strategies that force effort and engagement, not passive comfort.
Finally, let's discuss how to use tools, specifically mnemonic devices, to multiply our retrieval capacity once the effortful learning and consolidation is done.
These are systems for organizing knowledge, not acquiring it.
Right. Mnemonics, like the method of loci or memory palaces, are crucial, but we must make that key distinction you mentioned.
They are not tools for learning per se. They won't help you understand angular momentum. They are for creating structured mental storage systems to easily retrieve what has already been learned and understood.
They are mental file cabinets.
That's a good way to put it.
Let's look at James Patterson, the memory champion and psychology instructor. How does he apply the memory palace concept to help his students with complex, high-volume subjects?
Patterson's students must master 35 required essays for their high-stakes A-level psychology exams. Instead of trying to keep 35 complex arguments organized in their short-term memory, he teaches them to construct memory palaces using familiar routes, often real places like Oxford cafes.
So the cafe becomes the physical structure for the abstract concepts.
Exactly. Before an exam, Miklala Kim, one of his students, mentally walks through her memory palace, say, the Pret a Manger cafe near her school. She walks past the coffee counter, and that spot cues her first key argument about Piaget. She moves to the seating area, and that spot cues her second argument about cognitive development.
She has a physical, sequential structure for retrieving abstract concepts.
It's a game changer. It allows her to manage stress and complexity. When she mentally walks through the cafe, she lists the key ideas that form the plan for her essay. If she forgets a point at the ordering station, she simply skips it, moves to the next station, and returns to the forgotten point later.
So it's infinitely less stressful than trying to free recall a long, unorganized list.
Because the physical structure of the palace ensures she doesn't accidentally skip a major section of her argument.
And for sheer volume, Patterson also uses systems like the major system to memorize long strings of digits, vastly exceeding the typical working memory limit of about 7 items.
The major system is a way of translating abstract numbers into concrete, memorable images. It associates sounds with numbers. 6 is the SHJ sound, 1 is TD, and 5 is L. So the 3-digit number 615 becomes SHTL.
And SHTL becomes?
Patterson instantly associates SHTL with the image of a space shuttle.
So instead of trying to remember 9 individual digits like 615493280, he remembers 3 concrete interacting images. A space shuttle, maybe a razor, and a ninja.
He is cognitively chunking the information, which makes it far easier for System 1, our intuitive visual memory, to retrieve. The genius of all these strategies, from retrieval practice to memory palaces, is that they all force active engagement and provide objective feedback, guiding us toward genuine, durable mastery.
Rather than settling for the illusion of knowing.
Exactly.
To bring this all together for you, mastery is truly a quest, not a grade you receive or something bestowed upon you by age or seniority. It is not something that just seeps into your being passively.
No.
It requires embracing difficulty, strategic effort, and consistency. You have to trade the comfortable feeling of fluency for the difficult, challenging effort of retrieval and spacing.
And that strategic effort should be guided by dynamic testing. You should view your expertise as being in a state of continuing necessary development.
So you're never done.
Never. Instead of resting on your strengths, which is what a fixed mindset encourages, you must use retrieval and objective feedback testing yourself to systematically discover your weaknesses and focus your effort on bringing those up. This willingness to seek out and address your own blind spots is essential for becoming truly competent and versatile.
We've seen that striving, the feeling of rustiness, and setbacks are not signs of failure. They are essential for surpassing your current level of performance. They are the physical mechanism by which the brain rebuilds itself.
That's the key.
If failure is just useful, corrective information, and effort literally changes the very structure of your brain, what difficult, effortful learning challenge have you been avoiding that you should tackle this week?
The cow that makes you feel a little rusty requires you to supply the answer from scratch and maybe makes you commit an error or two. Go ahead, make the path to that new knowledge a little difficult. We promise it will stick.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you feel empowered to make your next learning effort truly count.